I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I realize Go Z in the lab currently, it's a little bit broken the way it's currently set up. So I found kind of a better method. Sometimes through the glitches we discover a better way of doing things. So I'm going to basically hit Control-Shift-A. I clicked on the viewport, hit Control-Shift-A to select all the mesh. I found actually exporting FBX seems to give the best results for exporting complex scenes like this. So I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, click on the options box, set this to FBX, Export Selection. Let's see, I'm just going to go to my computer for now. And I'll just call this interior, that's fine. Yeah, I've seen this too. It says some materials and material types can't be exported. That's fine. It's not a big issue. I'll go back to Zbrush. So yes, let me go to imports. There was kind of one crucial thing that I noticed was really helpful about importing an FBX from Maya. Okay, so it's gonna import the scene. You can have it import your camera. Again, it's not crucial to have the camera in ZBrush because we're just going to be sculpting here. Okay, let's see. What's it saying? Okay, so we'll let it go through. If there's lots of objects, it can take a while. One thing I should mention too is that sometimes objects will come in potentially broken, especially if you haven't... Here's the scene. So I basically have to drag it out once it's been brought over, and then left click and drag. Sorry, hit T mode, left click and drag, and then you can activate the scene. So all the subtools should be fairly well organized. I do recommend, for example, if you have stairs and things like that, if you think they should be a singular item, then maybe combine them together. So like all these little, let's say wooden planks, it would be a little bit easier if they were merged as a single object in Maya. Something else that can happen too, I'm just looking for it. I thought I saw it on one object, but if you have an object that, let's say, doesn't have clean, like here, back here I can see. Whoop. We took a look at this. I'm going to solo this. You see this here, right? It's kind of broken. What is happening is that the object in here, I'll switch to perspective so we can see this. Basically, this has more than 4-sided polys, okay? So a lot of software will not know how Maya is actually interpreting polygons with more than 4 sides. This has 5 sides, right? So not the cleanest. Usually you'd keep these edges going through the mesh or make sure that, you avoid this by basically doing a target weld. Oops, sorry, let me do this in vertex mode. Right, so then you can have tris, you can have quads. You can't have more than 4 sides. Software doesn't know what to do. Okay, so simple trick I have for this is, let's get out of here. Select all objects, go to mesh, clean up, and I'll go to the options. And so again, I'll go back here, mesh, clean up. Where is it? Sorry, clean up and go to the options box. And then inside the options, the main thing I want to turn on here is faces with more than 4 sides. It will triangulate this. So once I hit clean up, you see, and it keeps those trouble areas selected, so you can sort of see where the issues might have been. All right. Yeah, the other thing, as I was mentioning, is these objects. You can kind of combine these for ease of organization, sculpting, that sort of thing. They're not labeled, so that makes it hard to just kind of go in and grab them from the outliner, but shift, right click, combine. Okay, so that sort of thing just kind of makes life a bit easier, I find. By the way, if you're doing this a lot, you can just hit G, it repeats the last command. Okay, so let's say if you have a chair, it's made up of like way too many parts. This one's fine for now. Okay, so I'll just grab everything here, go back to File, Export Selection, and save over. Yeah. Go back here. I usually like to switch to a generic object when I import, because sometimes ZBrush will recognize objects with the same name or similar names and can do some really strange things. It's useful in one instance, but in other cases it can be very kind of catastrophic. So I recommend, yeah, just switching to a generic, you know, cylinder, sphere, whatever. Go back to import. So what I used to do is I would go Z, it would send everything over, and it would be in the original size, XYZ size. But one thing I noticed, and I'll just point it out while everything's loading here, ZBrush, with the FBX import, it's actually doing something really interesting in that it's keeping things to ZBrush's preferred scale of 2 centimeters, but then just saying, hey, there's a scale factor. So I like 2 centimeters, but things in the scene are actually upwards of 1400 if we multiply by 2, right, for ZBrush's scale. It's saying, hey, there's a factor here, so when I send it back to Maya, let's keep that scale, okay? So I find that incredibly helpful. Whereas before, it was a lot of just kind of complicating issues, but I find actually doing this FBX export is much cleaner, much nicer, and much more friendly for a workflow. Okay, so I'll get out of solo mode so we can sort of see. I believe, is this not the same camera view? Yes, it seems to be basically the same camera view. I haven't kind of worked out this part of the workflow. I believe we can store the camera. But I'm not sure how to lock it. I have to look into that a bit more. I haven't done too much work directly with cameras because, again, I'm usually just sculpting. But it would be useful for the renders. Worst case scenario, you can actually export the camera on its own again and just import it for the finale. Okay, so things I might do, right? Because blocking is often, you know, very rough, very rudimentary mesh, right? Ideally, your scene. So again, let me go back to Maya for a second. Ideally, your scene is kind of aligned right to the grid. So if I go to top view, it's nice and aligned here. And it's fine if you have objects that are off on an angle. That's totally fine. Usually what I would do is basically go back to a grid aligned style of object. So, oops. Like these pots, the pots themselves actually are pretty much okay as is. Sometimes when I'm considering, you know, do I want something that basically has a more even mesh, I'm just going to alt click on this with the move scale rotate or the transpose tool and just holding alt, hit the center and then reset, just nudge this over. Sometimes I'll want to remesh things, and I'll show you the difference. So if I hit Z remesh on this, right, it's going to basically give me a more even distribution of polygons, meaning they're going to be a bit more square than these kind of stretched out rectangular polys. And that matters for one reason, that if I divide this up a few times and I go to sculpt, for example, right, you see that there is some kind of like stretching of, even at higher divisions, you know, it's not quite clean at every angle. So I will often just kind of go in and Z remesh. Okay. So Z remesh, and if you like to, you know, you can sort of say, okay, with this Z remeshing, maybe I want to alter the shape a bit, which you can you're more than welcome to do. If I go in half as well, I can make one maybe really, really low poly, for example. Just keep in mind too, you might start to alter the shape as you do this, as you get lower and lower poly. Oops. Okay, so now I can hit Control D. That's the shortcut to divide. 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 Okay, so I'll use this as a basic example. I'm going to basically solo this. I do this pretty much all the time, especially on complex scenes or even just with the individual pieces of maybe a single creature, character, or whatever it might be. So there's a couple ways we can deal with this. If I want to have, let's say, I'm guessing it's either ceramic or some sort of clay, right, pot. I'm going to load up XMD, which has a lot of extended brushes. I also will use something like ambientcg.com. There's also, if you look up Megascans, It's now, it used to be its own kind of website. It's now part of Fab, which is Google's kind of like mega website for assets. So I'll go to Fab. Now, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. They used to be all free, and now they're charging like per asset. But I think if you had an account and added the assets to your account before they started charging, they should be free still. So yeah, if you go to materials and textures, you can go to building and human made, maybe like stone or plaster, right? So I like to look for, yeah, like let's say this kind of texture, stucco is kind of interesting, or yeah, cracked plaster. But again, MCG is fully free. So I'll just maybe try clay and see what's in there. Also very, very high quality materials. So a lot of times, yeah, I'm basically just using, yeah, I kind of like this almost like rustic sort of texture. I usually will download a maximum quality image. And this process I will repeat over and over and over again. So I'll show you how to make your own brushes, and then I'll show you the benefits of using something like XMD Toolbox. All right, basically it's a big brush alpha texture management system. So if I go in here and look up maybe clay, I don't know if there is any clay. Yeah, there's sort of like, I mean, there's a variety of clay brushes. So let's say I go in here. If you double click it on it, it will open it. So if you take a look at this, right, I can almost kind of create a clay-like effect. I'll probably do it at a lower intensity since it seems to be pretty aggressive. Also, this thing I think has a thickness from what I can tell. So I'm going to actually turn on back face mask just so I can focus on the exterior, not kind of brush through the interior. Yeah, so this is kind of fun for a little base texture. Just keep in mind, it is, yeah, it's moving quite a lot around here, but... And this thing, it's 300,000 polys, which is actually still quite low, so things might still look a bit kind of pixelated, essentially. One thing I'll mention, too, is that if we go back to our approximate camera view here, you kind of don't need to worry about sculpting all sides of this thing. You could just sculpt the sides that are primarily in view, okay? Or, if you're going to use this thing more than once, sculpt the whole thing, move it, rotate it, so then it looks different. So sometimes one object can look like 3 or 4 objects because you've rotated it differently and maybe just tweak a few brush strokes here and there, okay? So you can work very smart. Yeah. Okay, so I downloaded this kind of clay ground texture. Usually what I do is I'll take, if there's a map to take, I'll take the displacement. So from Ambient CJ, they pretty much always have a displacement texture. So like I said, when I'm developing basically a custom brush, I'll switch to standard brush, switch to a drag rectangle, and then on the alpha, go into, click on the alpha, click on import, and then I'll locate the displacement. And if I click and drag, I'm going to just up the resolution so we can really see it, and maybe up the intensity so we can really see, okay? So again, that's obviously too intense. Also, it's bulging out quite a bit. Sometimes I'll show you this really interesting feature. If you go to alpha, modify, mid value, I'll just zoom in for a second, mid value, you can crank this, and what it'll try to do is kind of say, okay, let's keep this a bit neutral. So we add the detail without pushing the surface out too much. So 100 is way too much, it was actually pushing in, so I'll try 50 or 60. Right, and so it's sort of trying to keep that surface like relatively neutral. Now again, if I go back down in intensity, I find like 30, anywhere between like 5 and 30 as an intensity value is usually pretty good. So now if I go around, right, I can kind of make some bigger ones and rotate them as I go. Also be aware that as you're pulling out from one direction, yeah, I think even that intensity is a bit high, so I'll dial it down to like 20. Keep in mind, as you drag out here, this is parallel to the surface, right? But you see there's streaking that happens up here. So you may want to go back later and touch up some of those regions. Okay. But pretty nice, right? We get this kind of rustic texture. I do find you need to kind of hit at least 1 million, if not typically more like 4 million polys plus to get some halfway decent texture working on your objects. Right? Pretty good. Again, I'll go back and kind of check my approximate view here. Yes, and if I'm being lazy, well, I'll just rotate like so. So yeah, sometimes you can basically like sculpt essentially to your approximate camera view. I'll just kind of try to get at least a good quick kind of coverage on this thing. Okay, let's go to solo. Again, I'll do the bottom two just because there might be, you know, maybe this thing gets tossed over. Okay, so just like that, I've got, right, a fairly well textured plant pot base. XMD, you can get a free version. I have, you do have access to it as well. So if I go into damage, there's some really great stuff in here. Damage, right? Again, these are just alphas. So I can throw in, you know, kind of like something that looks like it's had a chip, a chunk taken out of it. Let me just tweak the intensity a bit. Okay. So yeah, making those, you can do them basically either via sculpting or via images like photo editing. Sorry, let me jump back to this. There's some other ones, like I think there's cracks and things like that. I'm not a huge fan of some of the crack brushes. I find they're kind of a little bit low res, but in this case, yeah, it's actually working out pretty good. So sometimes, you know, if I use it, if I reuse it, I'll try to reuse it, but sort of twist the angle, the intensity, right? Vary things so it's not going to look so static. Cool. All right, so yeah, let's say these chairs are, you know, they're very kind of rough and rudimentary. I'll check the reference board and sort of see what style of chairs there are. Yeah, okay, so sort of like this wicker thing. Yeah, in this case, I might start kind of a new item, or I'll sort of work with the scene and yeah, let's go and do. I'll do a insert primitive. I'll do insert cylinder, and I'll just kind of draw it pretty much directly on top of this one. Okay. Scale it up. Okay. Now this, let me just solo this. So this is basically, right, it's all, this current chair is aligned to the setting. I'm going to just make one that's kind of cleanly aligned to my view, basically to my front view. So I'm going to go to, yeah, I'll clear the mask, and basically this thing should have polygroups. So what that means is if I Control-Shift-Click on the base once, it isolates it. Control-Shift-Click again, I delete it, okay? So it's hidden, I should say. I have to go to Mesh Editing, Delete Hidden, or if you don't have my interface, it'll be under Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, okay? All right, so I'll get it a solo for a second. I'll just reset my pivot by holding Alt and clicking on that circular arrow. If you hold Control, you can make a copy. I'll hold Control again. Oops, maybe I'll clear the mask if there's masking there. And I'll just hold Control and pull them forward. Okay, and then what's kind of nice about this is I can sort of just chop it. Again, I'll just solo it. It's a bit easier. I can literally just go in. I can either like scale it down, which would work fine, right? Or you could use like, I don't know, trim brush, slice brush. Trim would work better. Say something like this. All right, so either way is fine. Two ways to do the same thing, right? The height's about right. If not, I can always scale it up a little bit. Yeah, I'm just going to take a look at, yeah, it's sort of this style, right? Where there's kind of all these bars. Yeah, I'll show you some tricks to kind of get like either this like wicker effect or the rope. Okay. Okay, so I think I'll probably just copy these. So to copy something, if it's unmasked, you just hold Control, click and drag, and I'll use basically the same kind of bars. Hold Shift when you're rotating, by the way, if you want to have this kind of snap a bit. So you get a nice clean angle to start. Okay, one issue that sometimes comes up when I'm modeling, these are all the same polygroup. So if I want to just take one of these bars and rotate it, let's say 90 degrees to go across this way, okay? What I'll probably do, this is in my custom interface, auto group. To get that, it's basically in polygroups. There's a button somewhere in there, polygroups, auto group, first one. So what that allows you to do now with that transpose or move, scale, rotate tool is you control click on one. Again, I'll center, alt reset this. Now that one's isolated, and I'll rotate this. Okay, and then I'll hold Control, do the same thing. So again, these three are kind of within one polygroup. So again, I'll just redo auto groups, and if you control click on individual polygroups, because I want to use these crossbars a couple of times, I think. So I'm going to hit Control W so that they're their own group. So again, next time I control click on that group, holding Alt, I'll reset this, and the circle, reset the pivot. So now I can just hold Control, bam, put that down. Okay. Maybe I'll do this for the backing part too, just have a few bars there, let's say. Now, of course, I don't need, I don't need this group here. So I'm going to go to Select Rectangle, hold Control Shift, Alt, and hide that, and then I'll just go to Delete Hidden. Okay, I'll control click on this. So again, this is kind of a handy trick, is that when you have the transpose or move, scale, rotate tool active and you control click on a group, it automatically masks all the other groups. So I want these bars maybe to be thinner, not so wide. So I'm going to go to trim. So trim will now only affect this unmasked area. Okay, so I'm just going to trim. I could scale, but trim for me I think is going to work better. And I want them to be a little bit skinnier. So what I can try to do is go to deformation. Inflate makes things kind of bulkier or bulgier. So I might try to bring them down a bit. One thing that's happening, as you may notice, is it's definitely skewing the mesh a bit. So I'll show you why in a second here. Let me just hide this off. Yeah, you see these polygroups at the ends are kind of rough, right? So what I'll probably do is just do a quick Z remesh. Again, it sort of just makes things consistent. I might just say double the poly count for now too. And I'll say keep groups as well. And I'll turn off smoothing, because smoothing can kind of round out the shapes and make things really awkward and ugly. There, that's totally fine. So if I hide this again, right? These should, I think, inflate a little bit better. We'll try that. Yeah, because there's no weird topology at the ends. Oops, I forgot the... Hold on a second. Yeah, the endpoint's there. So let me just undo. And there we go. Just isolate that grouping again. Hopefully it'll inflate okay, negative inflate. Now it's still kind of doing a weird thing, but... Alright, so in this case what I'll do, yeah, I'll just basically hold Control Shift and click these things away for now. Yeah, I'll do this. I'm going to basically isolate this grouping here, and I'm going to go to Split Hidden under Subtool. So Split Hidden will basically allow me to sort of break that junky part off of the model. Oops, where am I here? Okay, so yeah, there's the chair, and yeah, that's the, I'm not sure if that's where it is, but sort of sent it. Okay, there we go. I see it here. So yeah, this is basically now left behind as its own group. So I can pretty much just delete that, I think. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. All right, so then I've got something like this. Okay. All right, so I want to show you a little trick that I use too. So these chairs look a bit rustic and a bit rough. So what we can do is basically go through and Yeah, I'll use this thing called surface noise. Before I do that though, I think what I might do, I want to sort of arch the back of the chair. Right, these things kind of curve out a bit. So I'm going to just control click and flip the mask around. I'll alt click on the pivot again and center it. And if you click on this little gear icon, it actually gives you a lot of direct deformers or modifiers. So if I go to bend arc, for example, again, very kind of strange tool to use at first. So there's basically like an angle setting. Yeah, let me try this. Oops. Yeah, that's definitely not right. Yeah, I find if that is awkward, sometimes it is. I'll try and just use maybe bend curve. This one can be a little bit more direct. So if you take a look at this, there's basically these different cones. So you've got this thing called the curve resolution. So I'll do, yeah, maybe a resolution of this. And then you're literally just clicking and dragging the points themselves, okay? So that makes it nice to kind of create these, you know, flared, curved sort of shapes, okay? I'll click on the gear, hit accept. Okay. Now, next up, what I'll do, I'm going to go into, I was going to do what's called an insert mesh, right? So insert primitive. What I want is actually a thin plane because I want to kind of create the drapery of basically the seat. So I think what I'll do is, yeah, I'll go to B for brush, I for insert. There's a different set of insert primitives called the half primitive, and this one includes like a single polygon. So I'll just kind of click and drag. And I'll reset the pivot so it's a little bit more clean and aligned. And I'll just scale this up a bit. Okay, so I'll raise this up just a bit too. So again, what I'll do with this, I want to split this into its own little subtool. So I'm going to go to split unmask points. And I'll turn off solo. One thing you can do, because I want these two to interact, I'm basically going to do a cloth sim right now, okay? So if I shift click on one of the eyeballs on the subtool, it'll hide everything except the one I'm currently on. So I'll just make sure these two are visible. And I'm going to be on the, basically this kind of seat cushion thing. I'm going to go to Z-Remesh because I want a bunch of polys. I might just go to double. Yeah, can I double again? Double, 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 double. Okay, so then I'm going to basically in symmetry, I think I'll mask. By the way, if symmetry is not working, symmetry will work. It's that it sort of works on the world pivot or the pivot of the whole scene. If it's not aligned to your object, you just simply have to turn on this button over here called local sim. I usually turn off dynamic. I find I don't need it most of the time. So now if I hold control, click and drag, it's going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go into dynamics. If you turn on collision volume, it'll say, hey, this chair is going to interact with the cloth seat, let's say, okay? Turn on collision volume. The other thing I want to do is reduce, this is what's called inflate. So when there's contact, it's going to make it kind of float off of that seat, and I don't want that. I want it to establish like very solid contact. So I'll hit run sim. As you can see, it like drooped right through the floor, to the floor. So if you go in here, you can basically increase the fabric firmness, and I'll run this again a bit better. Run sim a little bit better. And there. Now, if I'm not totally happy with the calculation, sometimes what I'll do is I'll hit B for brush, T for transpose, and go to transpose cloth. So what's cool about this is that now if I pull this down, it will actually give me a kind of like simulated, okay. Let me just turn off symmetry. I'll center this, reset it. So I just blurred the mask a bit. And maybe I'll pull this down. Okay. Now, one of the tricks I'll do in here is that if you go in, you can basically do this where you can go to geometry dynamic subdivision, turn it on. So it gives you kind of a smooth version of this. And then you simply turn on thickness. So you give this thing a certain thickness. Again, I'll just adjust the overall height. Keep in mind, this thing is still going back. So when I hit WER, it's going back to the transposed cloth. In this case, I don't want to keep simulating this part of it. I just want to move the overall thing up without any distortions of the shape. So that's a good tip, is to kind of reset that back. Okay. So if you wanted something that has a thickness like this, this is a good way to do it. I'll show you something else that's kind of interesting too. I should see if I have a rope brush. I'm not sure if I do, but I'll check. Okay, perfect. I've got a couple of these different, yeah, these are insert ropes, but. So if I double click on this. Okay, so you check this out. This is a curve brush, right? And if you have a smaller draw size, yeah, I think it's kind of still stuck to the scale, but. What we can do, I want to show you a really interesting trick, is that we can go through with ZModeler, let's say. ZModeler. So what ZModeler can do, right, is you can insert edges, you can remove edges. If I go in here to, if I hover over an edge and hold spacebar, I can go to crease, edge loop complete. And let's say I'll just kind of do every second edge, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay. Okay, so there's a really, really great function with curve brushes. So if I go back to that curve brush, which was the rope, if you go to stroke, curve functions, you can say, I want to frame these creased edges, right? Then if I click on this with the rope brush, that's how you can quickly create repeating dynamic patterns, right? So if I had like a rope texture sitting on there, or you know, some kind of woven fabric, if you want to get into that level of detail, you can. You don't need to. You can just sculpt it, right? So you can have textures of fabric or rope. So I just wanted to show you that as a really kind of amazing function. So yeah, let me just jump back to, let's say, ambient CG. I'll just type in some kind of fabric here. Yeah, something that has kind of like a woven knit sort of detail to it. Okay, and I'll switch back to a standard brush. The other thing, you know, I'm not liking the overhang of this stuff, so I might just, oops, go to select rectangle and just hide the outer polys here. Go to delete hidden. Okay, and I'll have to unzip this, so let's unzip. By the way, if you want to save a brush, so let's say I like that kind of clay pottery brush I did, I can just click on the standard brush and go to save as, and you can actually save that as a preset, a ZBP, ZBrush preset, that then you can use again and again and again, okay? This time I'll just basically load a different alpha. Displacement, there we go. Now again, if you click and drag this out and it looks like this, it's basically telling you, you know, usually when things look kind of rough, it's because either the brush isn't high enough res in terms of the image or the alpha, or the mesh itself isn't high enough res. So again, this is also very, very high intensity, so I'll dial this back down to something like 10. The other thing too is that it's fading at the edges. This is something due to something called focal shift. So if you set focal shift to -100, then you get this kind of clean expansion of that, okay? Now I've used regular divisions. Dynamic subdivision doesn't actually add real divisions to the mesh for sculpting. It's a preview. And so if you're mixing the two, now it's saying my mesh looks like it's 2.34 million polys or whatever. So I don't want to use the smoothing in this case. I'm just going to use the thickness trick for this. Or maybe in fact what I'll do, yeah, I might do this. This edge is looking rough. I might just actually delete my sculpting divisions for now. Apply the thickness. Yeah, just move this up a little bit. So I'll say apply, and then I'll just essentially Control D divide to get some real mesh in here. And I'll turn on backface mask as well, just so I can throw that texture on. Okay. And don't forget too, you can always like try to hack this a bit and duplicate this components. And so if I duplicate, rotate, and then maybe I'll bend into position. Oh yeah, you can't do certain things with divisions, so sometimes I'll just say delete lower, and then I'll go to bend curve here. Which axis are we on? There we go. Okay, so I'll just tweak this a little bit more. Or, you know, I like that it actually follows the shape of the bars, and this middle part I'll fix just with brushing. So I'll hit accept, switch to a move brush, and again, I deleted my lower divisions just to be able to do this, so I'm going to reconstruct. I find it often helpful to move things at lower divisions, so I'm going to hold Alt, and this allows me to pull those polys forward. And then if I go back in res, we see that working fine, right? Okay, I'll just pop in the rest of the scene now. Right, so that can be the beginning of like your replacement chairs, right?